Hello and welcome to the Novel Creature Network. I'm your host, Montrez, fantasy author of Superpowered Urban Fantasy Erin and your next favorite portal, Fantasy Labyrinth Park. And I am here today with the amazing, fantastic, and fabulous dystopian fantasy romance author, Nelle Nikole. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who's listening for tuning in. Nell, thank you so much for being a part of the Novel Creature Network. I've been seeing you around on Instagram, and I love like all your graphics and all the ways that you promote your work. And just recently, I was able to be part of your ARC review team, and I'm a fan. So I'm really excited to just have you on and talk about like everything that you're creating. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, I'm really excited. I love doing these little chats, so.
Yay. Well, here on Novel Creature Network and just in general, I do believe that our stories, both the ones that we write, the ones that we read, but more importantly, the ones that we live, are things that can really save and transform lives. And so I would love to know, what's your author origin story?
It's a good one. I feel like I have the cliche one where it's like, oh, I've been writing my entire life, but I kind of have been. It really started, I want to say, fourth or fifth grade. I had a teacher, and we had these squiggle books, and they would just draw a squiggle on this sketch pad, and then we had to add to the drawing and create a story. So I was making like this horror short story and reading it to my class, and it actually got me in trouble. The teacher like called my parents and said that I was reading inappropriate stories in class, and then my mom read it and she was like, wait, this is actually really good, like you might be talented a little bit. And so I kind of kept writing my entire life, and I was changing how I do it. I would do short stories, and then in college I had a blog where I was talking about current events, politics. Grad school I was doing more academia writing, and then I graduated and I have the hardest time sitting still. So I was like, I need to do something. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to write a book. And I didn't think it was going to be anything like what it turned out to be. But now it's not even a full year later, and I'm a few books in, and here I am.
And that's fantastic because, I want to draw something out that you said. You said that, it's like the cliche, but I think sometimes we don't realize how powerful and how amazing our individual journeys are. We're thinking, I'm just your average person. I'm just, everybody's probably thinking about doing this, or you know what I mean? We go through that. And I just want to say that, I had a similar experience, but hearing your journey is really inspiring because, I wrote all the time and, played with stories and different things. But like to hear, how you said, hey, I'm gonna write a book. And then you said not even a year later,
Yeah.
not even a year later. And so for anyone who's listening to this, if you want to write, if you have, or whatever your goal may be, like just do it. Just do it. And
Yeah.
our timelines are different, but that's fantastic. I don't care how like insurmountable it seems, how big it seems, like and you, from the material that I've seen, you would think that you're a pro at this and you've been doing it for years. So
Thank you. No, I think you make really good points because
Mhm.
when we're writers, we kind of had this creative aspect with us our entire lives. But
Right.
previously, everything that we knew, I mean, there was always self-publishing, but we were set on this whole, you have to be traditionally published. And that seemed like some unattainable goal. And then we are in this age now where it's not. I mean, we have a lot of traditionally published authors that we see out in the media space, and then there's the self-published authors, and you just realize you can kind of do anything. And it actually took another author that I was an ARC reader for, Ari Lay. She wrote a Queen's Game. I was her ARC reader, and I was following her on TikTok, and she was going through her corporate day and then how she would have to come home and write. And I was like, wait, I could totally do this. Like, this is not something that's just an unattainable dream goal for me.
Right. And that's, I think that's the importance. That's what I mean when I say that our stories can literally save and change people's lives. Somebody is going to hear this and be like, you know what? I'm gonna try it.
I hope
And
so.
so if you're listening and you've been thinking about it, try it.
Do
Try
it.
it, guys. But that's awesome. So along that line, what's your creative superpower?
I love your questions, by the way. But what I've heard is that it's world building and driving, like having very well fleshed out side characters and making them like important to the story too. Which were things that I didn't realize I was really doing. I was just kind of writing the story that I always wanted to fall into. But now in my second book and then the new series that I'm working on, I'm trying to be more intentional about doing those things, and it's fun, and I'm good at it, and I like doing things that I'm good at. So
That's awesome. Yeah, and world building definitely is something I love world building, and I definitely think you created an immersive world, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, world building, if you can get us in the world and you can get us caring about your characters, like you've got me, which is probably why I'm such a huge because you totally know both, and I'm really excited. But so we talked about your creative superpower, but now let's talk about what's your kryptonite when it comes to writing.
yeah, I think my kryptonite would have to be the romance aspects of my writing. With the themes that I was tackling in the first book, I just felt like there wasn't really space for that or time with like the world ending again for them, their home under attack, and then just the trauma that they were going through. There wasn't really a time or place for the romance. And having been someone that hasn't really read the romance genre in 10 years, I've been more of the fantasy, like hard fantasy, and then fantasy romance. There's just so different
Yes.
then one, the books that I write, and then two, just the romance genre in general. I had to kind of go back and start doing research and reading more of the contemporary romance and reading some contemporary romance that had like heavier themes in it to kind of figure out how I could tie it into the heavier themes of my book. And so it's something that I struggled with, but I did my best to kind of address in the second book when things were kind of, they didn't slow down, but they gave them the opportunity to form romantic bonds in a different way. A better way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge because like a lot of times as authors, like there's kind of like a pressure to have romance in there. And yes, that's a part of it, but we want it to happen organically. And
Yeah.
so I really appreciate you bringing that up and talking about that. And then, the element of being able to research by reading, so that I think that's always crucial to do because yeah, like that's the best way to learn like when you're reading like what works. But with that, can I ask you what authors kind of helped you to kind of navigate that? Like what books did you read with
Mhm.
your romance?
I am a big Lauren Asher girly. I love her books. And so kind of how I go about it is when I'm reading, I highlight anything that makes me giddy. And then after I'm like, I go back through and I'm like, oh, this is the kind of stuff that people are looking for within romance. And so kind of channeling that, feeding into my own plot. It was a little bit difficult because she has darker themes in her book. She addresses some really real topics, but they're not the topics of running for your life and preventing a war. And so kind of taking the smaller gestures or the eye contact or the longing looks, noting the drop in voices, think like those small details that really help build the tension.
Mhm.
It was really helpful reading her work. She's my biggest. I tried a few other authors, but I think I'm just a Lauren Asher girly when it comes to contemporary romance. For me, when I read those books, I need something that because it's a fictional world, but a lot of them are based in the world that we exist in. I need a sense of realism to the plot, and she does a really good job balancing that. And I think that's why I like her work and why I kind of use her as inspiration when writing my own.
That's awesome. And I think you did a really good job of nailing that down. You've got some one-liners in there that just kind of like, oh, and it feels really organic, you know what I mean? Which is really, really big for I know for me when I'm reading. I mean, just wonderful job. Like the realism, the romance, the relationships, the drama. Like
Oh, the drama.
so I think you've nailed it. Like that kryptonite, you got it. But let's kind of get into that because the world that you have created, let's talk about science fantasy. What is that? And how did you blend the science aspects, the sci-fi aspects with the fantasy? That's something that, it's not new, but like we see like a new emergence of it.
Mhm.
And I've always thought that was really fascinating how people blend it. I've read it in like works like with Lascelles Samberry and some other people, but like the way that you navigated it with like zombies and superpowers and magic, can we talk about your brand of
Yeah.
science fantasy for a minute?
I am a big fantasy girly through and through. That is the genre that I primarily read. And so I knew when I was creating this world, I wanted those elements in there. And previously, a lot of my time had been spent reading books that kind of had that hard magic system where there's all these rules. But I wanted something that had those hard rules, but also had the things that were kind of, I'm struggling for the word, out of the box and unexpected. Like with Riley's gifts or with Steph's gifts, just those things that make sense with the hard magic system, and kind of enhance that. But then I really like those science fiction post-apocalyptic themes, and you could probably see it in my writing. I'm a big Walking Dead girl. And so I really wanted to kind of take those post-apocalyptic science worlds of, okay, there's these factions, these territories kind of like divergent, but in The Walking Dead, you see all these different civilizations or communities that are trying to establish a new normal. And they all look so different and they all have their pros and cons to them. So kind of just exploring all these different worlds that I love, and the social commentary of the Hunger Games and just these underlying themes mixed with what's actually happening in our world today, and making it something that is far-fetched but also not really, because it could happen. I mean, anything can happen. Science proves that every day. So yeah, I think it's really interesting taking those worlds and then mixing them with the hard science. And the second book explores dark arts, and for me, it's like everything but the kitchen sink. Like, if it fits, why not add it in? But doing it in a way that all of the underlying themes and rules of the genre interconnect.
Yes, definitely. And I think one of the things that really sticks out to me for the science fantasy, particularly in the dystopian post-apocalyptic settings, is that you have that dark, like science induced setting. You know what I mean? Like you see the dark possibilities of science and what it can bring, like the fallout of it. But then you have that magical element in it that kind of helps the characters to navigate that versus and in most post-apocalyptics it's like bare fist fighting or weapons or other scientific tools. And so I think it's the perfect marriage of those two themes and those two genres to kind of like play around with, like, and literally like you said, anything is possible. And so with that, can you take us on a tour? We talked about how
Yeah,
world building is like your thing, and I definitely think that this is
absolutely.
this is a world that really sinks you into it, and you really feel like you're part of it. It just immerses you onto the page, and it's kind of frightening because, like you said, it could really happen. So, What does Earth look like? What does the world look like in your book?
So I have the little map. So the story takes place in the post-apocalyptic version of the United States, but specifically the main community we focus on is Monterey, California. But as far the and it's kind of talked about briefly with the characters, that they know that nuclear war has affected the entire world. They know that in Canada and Mexico, there's still survivors, but they don't know anything about what's happening across the pond.
Right.
So it's kind of, are we alone? And there's 4 different territories in the United States, and they're kind of they're broken up by morality, but also by the environment that kind of influences what they believe morality to be, like what that thin line is. So our main focus is in Salem territory. And for me, I kind of designated it as this place that is operating in the new normal, as close to the normal that we've experienced within human history, or more recent human history. They have these communities that are essentially fully functioning cities in the 1800s, and some of them have power, some of them have cars, some of them have advanced technology, but then there's these portions of technology that don't exist, like in the Monterey compound, they have the elemental power room that has like modern technology, high-tech screens, stuff like that, but they don't have electricity. They don't have bathrooms in every house or apartment that they live in. But the architecture in there is like when you're walking through the streets, you can see Victorian houses, modern houses, Gothic style houses. Um, they've got like restaurants, shops, bars. They've got this new normal that they've established in a relatively short period of time, in 5 years. But it's because the way of life out there is easier than a territory like in the Expanse, where it's cold. It's basically this tundra where people are fighting to have their next meal, because with the cold and the new climate came animals leaving the area, animals coming extinct, overfishing, overhunting, fighting for land and competition. So the people up there are a lot harsher. And they maintain a sense of their morality, but there is a line that they're willing to cross for their mortality. Um, and then you go into transient nation, and this is kind of a nomadic way of living, going back to the origins of humanity, where they're hunting, they're gathering, they're on the move. And the people there, they like that. And I feel like, because it takes up these states like Texas and New Mexico, and like the people that are out there, you kind of think like Wild Wild West, even though it's not the Wild Wild West, but it's easy to picture them reverting back to that way of living. And then you've got Covert Province, where in book 1, nobody knows what it looks like in there. And in book 2, you find out what it looks like, and you're just like, oh my God. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but what they find there is that maybe Salem territory's normal isn't the most current normal that they could have, if there's a lot of government workers on that side, and I think that influences a lot of what happens in Covert Province. That was really long-winded, so
No, no, that was all good because I mean, you can really see how detailed and fleshed out this world is, like while you're reading it and even while you're talking, it's like, man, where would I go? Like, I definitely don't
yeah.
think I'd be in that cold area.
No,
You know,
I would live somewhere in Salem for sure.
definitely. Like, give me shops, give me like
Yeah.
cars. Let me
Mhm.
have some peace. So yeah, definitely the world building. It's immersive, and I definitely can see. I think fans of things like Divergent, with the factions and the different things. I think you guys would really enjoy this because you can kind of like really insert yourself into this world. I mean, it's just, and then with the maps. Now, are those maps available with the books as well?
Yeah.
Um,
So I have signed copies on my website where they include maps in them. But then if you go within each book, I like the Ingram copies better because the print is a lot more clear. I have the maps within the books, and they're also in the ebook. And then they're also just on my website too, if you want like easy reference without having to flip back and forth.
So guys, if you really want to get into a world, just immerse yourself. It's here. You want to come to Nelle Nicole's world because she's got the maps, she's got like everything. Like it's just get into it. But we talked about the world. Now I want to talk about your morally gray found family here. We've
I
got
love
some drama going on. And when I say drama, like my fans of Vampire Diaries and Walking Dead, you're gonna love it. Let's talk about the dynamics of your characters. Like you have a multi point of view story here.
it. Mhm.
And I think you do such a good job of making each character stand out in their own way, but also bringing them together. So, what did that look like? And do you have a favorite character?
I do have a favorite. I'll talk about that first. I have two favorites. So I think the first one is not shocking to anybody because I've heard that he's a lot of people's favorites. It's Riley.
Mhm.
And then the newer character, Abel, is also my second favorite character. And they actually don't have a lot of on page time because if you read my books, you'll know that I am not afraid to nick somebody. And so I'm scared that if I write them, I'm going to have to hurt them. And I don't want to do that. But those are my favorite. Those are my babies. Book 3 is going to have a lot more Riley in it, and I'm going to do my best to make sure he sees the other side, but who knows?
Oh my
But
gosh. So stressed.
all of my characters, so the main 5 that we kind of dive into their headspace for, outside of the main love interest, Alex Arias, they are based off the 5 stages of grief. And so all of their actions, their personalities, all of that is kind of tied to the stage that they're tied to. So we have denial, which would be Reina. Then we have anger, which is Mo. We have bargaining, which is Seth. Then we have depression, which is Amaya. And then we have acceptance, which is Riley. And even though, they touch on all of these stages of grief, and that drives how they react to certain things that are happening in the plot, which makes it easier to write. Like with Riley having acceptance, he's probably the easiest person to write because he is, I think, and I think why people like him a lot is because he kind of represents the last remaining straw to what we would consider the morally like okay thing to do now, but he is willing
Right.
to cross that line as things play out in the story. But the way that he crosses the line is like, okay, this is what I have to do to protect my family. I don't want to do it, but tomorrow's not promised, and so this is what I'm going to do. Um, and with Amaya and her battle with depression, it kind of is the driving force in the decisions that she makes and the things that she keeps from her family. In book 1, and yeah, like with all of the characters, it's kind of like that. But at the end of the day, they have a duty to the compound, and the compound is first. And so compound first, then family, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to protect that. And they love each other. Like they want the best for each other. So even when things get bad, like they get really, really bad in book 2, they always find that way to work together to achieve their end goal.
And I think that's fascinating because a lot of times we hear about tropes and different like types of character representations, but I love that you take the 5 stages of grief to explore characters because that's just so relatable when you're going through like a life-changing horrific event. That
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. And so that's a really unique angle for that. How did you decide to do that?
So book 1 is kind of personal.
Mhm.
It is a story. It's me putting my grief on paper. So in 2020, I lost my childhood best friend, and then a few years before that, I lost my grandfather, and I was really struggling with those stages of grief because grief is messy and it doesn't flow linearly the way that you would think when you're listing out the 5 stages. Like it's I mean, even today, like you can have a good day and then you can have a really bad week. And so I was kind of wanting to put my own emotions and feelings onto paper, and they kind of came out in my characters that way. And when I realized what I was doing, I was like, I should probably channel this a little bit more. But yeah, it started off as something that I did subconsciously, and then once I realized, I honed in on it.
Yes, and that's a beautiful thing about creativity. It can be so cathartic.
Mhm.
And I think not just for you, but like for people who may be reading that. And so I think that's awesome. And it gives me even greater appreciation for like the amazing story you've created here. Because I don't hear things like that often. And so that's really pretty cool. But we're going to take a second, guys. We've been talking about we've thrown some dystopian worlds and things around, but for all the novel creatures that will be tuning in, so let us know, guys, what your favorite post-apocalyptic dystopian film or TV show is in the comments. And now, can you tell us some of yours?
Yes. So my introduction to the genre was actually a book, and it's a series by Susan Beth Pfeiffer. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a YA series. It's called Life as We Knew It, and it's 3 books. The first two cover the same family, and the third book, actually, it might be 4 books. The third book covers a different family, and then they all merge together. And it's a book about what happens if the moon gets knocked off its axis and the effects it has on Earth. And it's so well done. I was obsessed with it, and I was like, I need more. Yeah, it starts when I think they're 16 and it ends when they're 22. So you kind of grow with the characters, but it's fascinating seeing an approach with the family and seeing what a blood tied family, how they would react in an apocalypse versus what I'm doing with the found family is different. It's interesting to see the differences and the parallels. But as far as TV shows, it's The Walking Dead. I have seen seasons 1 through 8. I want to say 5 times, and I say 8 very specifically because if you know, you know. And I've watched all the way through a few times too, so I love it. We're actually watching it right now because it's my fiance's first time watching it. So I'm really excited for us to finally get into The Ones Who Live because I heard that it is so good. I'm really excited.
Oh my gosh, yes, totally iconic. Now, what do you think of the one that they have? I think is it The Last of Us?
Yes,
You like that one?
I love it, and it's actually so funny because I had never played the video game, and the show came out as I was sending my manuscript to my editor, and I
Mhm.
was watching some of the stuff, and I was like, that kind of looks familiar. I'm gonna be in trouble. And then Ellie is a teenage girl, as you know, and then the show Ellie's a teenage girl, and I was like, oh, this is so suspicious. I've got to change it up. So in book 2, I was like, yeah, her full name is Eleanor, and Michaela was like, Michaela DiHernado, she was like, actually, I think in The Last of Us, her name is Eleanor too, so that's not gonna work. So it's really interesting, but I love the show. I'm excited for the next season, but I'm also a really big Pedro fan.
Definitely. And he's like he's in like everything sci-fi. He's like a sci-fi fantasy like
Hmm.
superhero. He's in like
Yeah,
everything. But
to
yeah,
have his job. Yeah.
I totally get that. But so let's take a minute because I saw something. You've got something new coming out. Can we talk about Cuxtal at Academy?
Yes. So I am co-authoring a new series with Michaela DiHernado. She is the author of the Hearts of Maya series and then recent release Blood and Brujas. She writes a lot of non-Eurocentric, Mayan-inspired stories, and I actually got my undergraduate degree in anthropology, focusing on Mayan cultural anthropology, but I focused a lot of my
Wow.
Mayan civilizations. So we both had this idea in our mind about writing an academy series, and she was like, "What if we did something together?" And I was like, "What if?" So we are writing a Mayan-inspired fae fantasy, urban fantasy academy series. Right now, we know it's probably going to be 4 books, maybe more. But the tropes are like grumpy sunshine, brother sister duo, insta lust, and the main male characters and love interests in this one are super yummy. We are kind of making it, I want to say 50% plot, 50% romance. So it's more of like along the lines of a romantasy, which was again a challenge for me. But it's an overprotective brother who's doing his best to protect his sister. There's a lot of mental health representation in this. We've got the main character that suffers from anxiety. We've got a love interest that's dyslexic, which is important to me because I'm also dyslexic. And I'm just really excited that it is truly a diverse academy series where we really hone in on the Mayan aspects and themes. So we have like a lot of the Latin American like representation, but then we also have different cultures inspired as well. And so it's super diverse, and I think that's really important because I'm a huge academy book fan, but having diverse characters within those worlds isn't the most popular thing to come across. And so, we're writing the books that we want to read, and I'm excited to share.
You had me at all the tropes, and then you bring in the summary, and I'm like, okay, I need that book now. So when you guys are ready to talk about that, definitely want to have you on for that. We definitely need. I'm an academy, dark academia, urban fantasy. I love them, and I've been looking for more of them. And so this is really exciting. I'm really excited to promote that. Is it up on Goodreads yet? Like, can we add it to our?
It's not yet, but it can be by the time we put this on there. Yeah, it's not yet. We just established our release date, so I know we're announcing that soon. And Michaela is an artist, so she does all of her covers. So she'll be working on our cover. We'll have that up soon too. But we're actually going to finish writing that, and I say us. I'm the one responsible for the final 2 missing chapters, but that'll be done next week, and we'll start our reread in second draft.
That's awesome. So I can't wait to hear that. So guys, if you are listening and this hits all the buttons and everything that you're looking for, go ahead and tap into that. Follow. Make sure you follow her. Follow Nell for more. You can check out her socials. I have it running at the bottom of the screen. It will also be in the show notes. But definitely want to get into this. Like when we talk about world building, fantastic character development, Miss Nelle Nikole is where it's at. Like she will have you all up in those characters' worlds, thinking that you are part of the story too, and that you're a fly on that wall. Just amazing storytelling. And so I'm excited about to see where the rest of the series takes us with all of our friends in the zombie apocalypse world. And I'm excited to check out this new academy and just all you got going on. But also you mentioned a couple, you name dropped a couple names and a couple books. But for this segment, can you just share with us a couple of reading recommendations that you would like our readers to check out?
Yes. So if you're looking for, I love talking about my indie author friends because they deserve the world. Their writing is so good. So if you want something that is Mayan inspired again, lots of Latinx representation, I would check out the Hearts of Maya series by Michaela Di Hornado. She also released Blood and Brujas. That is a wide choose for all my romance girlies out there. And if you like the originals, the Michelson family, the female main character is like a mix-up of Rebecca and Klaus. Amazing. And then if you want romance, I call it romance, fantasy. I would check out Nina. I'm gonna butcher her name, so I'm gonna show the book instead because her last name is a little difficult. Laskowski, I want to say it the right way. The King's Weapon. I'm reading the second book right now because she is releasing a prequel in a few months. And this is really good if you want a strong FMC that may actually be the villain. And A Queen's Game by Ari Lay is if you like Reign, Game of Thrones, that high fantasy vibes, diverse representation in all aspects. You follow 3 main characters. That is A Queen's Game by Ari Lay. Then there's Living Legend by Ali Shante, which is the angels and demons aspect of things. The second book takes place in Purgatory, which is so freaking cool. I call her the smut master. So if you are a smut girly, check out her work. And then the most recent indie read that I actually read was A Fate of Smoke and Ash by Shania. Also cannot pronounce her last name. I'm so sorry. I think it's Shilion. But that was actually one of the best depictions of I don't know who I'm supposed to like, red flags everywhere, and true enemies to lovers trope. So go check out all of them.
All those recs sound fantastic, and yeah, I will be taking notes. So thank you for that. So guys, you've heard it. We've got like amazing books. Her books, get them all. Just add to cart. Follow her everywhere. Follow her on Instagram. Follow her on TikTok. Check out her website. Do you have a newsletter that we can follow?
Yes. And if you follow my newsletter, all of my ARC applications, alpha applications, and all of my news is shared through there first, and then my socials second.
Yes. So, we've kind of touched on that. I'm telling everyone to follow you and just like, subscribe, share. But how else can we best support you in your work?
I think what makes me feel the most supported is seeing my work shared on social media. Not just because it reaches more readers, which I find is actually really important for this genre specifically because it's a very niche specific group of readers, and a lot of people don't realize that they would enjoy the book until they've read it. Because dystopian and sci-fi sounds a little scary sometimes if you're not used to that. But it just makes me feel connected to my readers, and so it gives me the why I should keep writing.
Definitely. I feel you on that. So if you like the reads, you like what she's doing, go ahead and give her a shout out. Share with somebody, and let them know that you've enjoyed reading. And again, follow her everywhere. You will not be disappointed. Amazing stories. So one of the last things that we like to do here, give us a bit of blurred inspiration. Leave us with a thought of encouragement.
I'm gonna take a little bit from Nike and say just do it. And I mean, like, seriously, I didn't realize that it was possible to be so passionate about something and actually, I think we're all in survivor mode, like not just in this country, but all over the world. And so it's really important to find that thing that you can be passionate about and to focus on your why. Because if you focus on your why, you're not concerned about the results of what's happening, and everything will just happen organically, naturally, the way things are supposed to happen. But just reminding yourself of the why, finding that passion, and just challenging yourself to do it. I mean, you would literally be amazed by what happens if you just press the red button and do it.
So true. You're talking to me now. There's just some things I think we get anxious and we just need to do it.
Yeah.
That's perfect advice. Thank you so much. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. If you have any questions or just want to show some love, please hit the comments, hit the like button, share this video, spread the word, and buy all her books. Just buy them. You're going to love them. They are amazing. Immersive worlds, action, drama, romance. We dig into some heavy topics, but in like such an amazing way. I just thank you so much for being part of this, part of the Novel Creature Network, and for spending time with us today. Your work is just phenomenal, and I'm excited to see what all we have coming.
Thank you for stepping into my world. I know everybody says it means a lot, but it literally means so much to see people enjoying my work. So thank you for inviting me on here today.
Thank you. And thank you